nature-based tourism, which was the main topic of my thesis. Of course, it's not really easy to condense in 15 minutes what I've been doing for 5 years, so I'll try to do that and hopefully it makes sense. Okay, so what is the main idea of the thesis? Of course, we can simply understand, simply think about, okay, what is, how does nature become a tourism experience or a tourism product? There has been a lot of research going on recently, and there has been a lot of evidence, a lot of indications showing that actually there is a growing demand for nature experiences. And this is related to a lot of global processes that we have. For example, we have the growing urbanization. We also have growing income, for example, in the countries that did not have access to tourism before, or you know, different trends that people become more interested in nature because of the media development, etc. So whatever these global trends are, we have noticed that there is actually a growing interest in doing tourism in nature. And Sweden is a really good place to study this, because Sweden, unlike many other countries, has a very strong tradition of outdoor recreation. So this is something that people have been doing for quite some time, at least for a century in Sweden. And they have been doing it both commercially and non-commercially. So something that people just have been doing on their own, independently, without the help of businesses. However, recently we see that there is also actually a growing number of businesses that offer commercial experiences in nature. So my main point with the thesis was, okay, how can we understand this? How does nature become a tourism product with the help of these companies, nature-based tourism firms? My main questions of the PhD thesis were, okay, how can we actually understand this commercialization? What are the main characteristics? How does this happen? How does sustainability come into place with this? And also, when we think about doing business in nature, we also have to think that for these businesses, nature is their commercial operational setting. So they actually operate in nature. So how does this work out? Okay, so basically, this was the main outline of my thesis. And here, just for your easier understanding, there are the main two questions. Okay, so how does nature become an experience, a commercialized product, and what is the operational setting in the case of nature-based tourism? And this has resulted in 5 different papers, and my thesis have been informed by different fields of research and different fields of science, of course, because tourism studies is already an interdisciplinary field. So we have to be informed by also other streams of research, such as, for example, environmental economics or service and marketing literature. My main data sources were the nature-based tourism entrepreneurs in Sweden. And I tried to gather a representative sample, which would include all the provinces in Sweden, so from north to south, and this resulted in the sample size of about 600 entrepreneurs that offer nature experiences in Sweden. So I sent out my survey, and then I also did the supplementary interviews and observations with these companies. So I have been focusing on the supply perspective. And also, I have used some supplementary data, which included the information from nature-based tourism entrepreneurs in Norway, and also some publicly available statistics in Sweden, which was gathered by Statistics Sweden. Okay, so what were the main outputs from my PhD? And my PhD thesis, as an online copy, of course, is available publicly. And if you want to have a hard copy, I believe there are some copies left there, so you are free to pick them up, or also you could mail me if you want to have a hard copy. So the main outputs were, first of all, me and also my supervisor Peter Friedman, we published a report which actually included the descriptive statistics from what we have found out. So if you are interested in exact numbers of some of specific questions that were not included in my thesis, you can just go and look into this report. This is also publicly available, of course. And then I have 5 papers, which I will just give a brief overview. So first of all, we started with trying to understand, okay, how this rich knowledge and experience of outdoor recreation that has existed in Sweden, how can it help actually to understand nature-based tourism in the commercial context? And there were some interesting insights about how commercial and non-commercial areas actually overlap, but not completely. So there are some activities that exist only in commercial context, or some activities that exist only in non-commercial context. Further on, we try to understand what is the commercial setting and what are the necessary resources that have to exist in the background in order for these companies to create their experiences. And this could range from some certain landscape features or presence of certain animals or presence or absence of certain industrial artifacts, for example. And of course, a vivid example is something like maybe a windmill. How does this affect the landscape, and how does it affect the wilderness experience, for example? Then we looked at how distribution of various natural resources affects the localization patterns of nature-based tourism companies. Simply put, if we have a province that has a lot of forest, does it mean that actually it attracts a lot of forest-related tourism activities or not? And of course, there were some interesting insights regarding how natural resources have necessarily be combined with infrastructure and cultural resources as well. So having rich nature basically does not automatically react in very active nature-based tourism businesses in the area. Finally, I also supplemented the data set with some qualitative insights, looking at the wildlife watching tourism entrepreneurs in Sweden and how they actually deal with this property of unpredictability that nature is, of course. How they deal with, for example, if weather is bad, so how do they deal with creating a satisfactory experience for the tourists, even if they don't manage to deliver what they promised to deliver. And finally, we looked at some sustainability policies, especially looking at market-based solutions such as eco-labeling, and how eco-labeling can be understood in the context of nature-based tourism, and whether it's popular or not in Scandinavian countries, in both Sweden and Norway, and why is it not popular or popular. So these are the main overviews that somehow came together into the final thesis, final product. And if we try to merge and bring together all these papers, I could say that there are several points of interest that emerge out of my thesis. First of all, of course, there is some deeper knowledge about, okay, what is this sector actually in Sweden, how it can be conceptualized, and what are its main characteristics, because it has not been done before 2013. It was interesting to see that there is actually a great variety of nature resources that are commercialized through tourism. And some of these resources are actually not commercialized through any other industries. And this, for example, includes small mammals or insects or some types of landscape that has no commercial value outside of tourism. It's interesting to see that there is also a growing value of everyday or, so to say, simple activities in the commercial domain. And this is something that has been noticed before, that in general there is a commercialization trend. But the main emphasis has been put on, for example, skill or very equipment intensive activities, such as, I don't know, like paragliding or some specific activities that actually require guiding or have some high security standards. But in my thesis, it also was quite clear that simple activities, just hiking or walking or having a picnic, also have commercial value. There is a demand for this type of activities as well, because we have growing number of international tourists and also tourists that come from faraway destinations. And of course, primarily we have the growth related to China. And we can suggest that probably there would be even increasing demand in this type of activities. So there will be more tourists who are, simply put, are willing to pay for something that the local people don't. So it was also interesting to see that nature as a commercial operational setting is a very complex and heterogeneous space, that there's many actors that have to come together and cooperate in order to deliver the nature-based tourism experience. And on behalf of many companies, many small businesses, it actually requires a very hard daily work that they have to maintain. And finally, what was interesting to notice is that market-based solutions such as eco-labeling also have challenges in the Scandinavian countries, despite Scandinavian countries being the most sustainable countries in the world. You're probably aware that Sweden was ranked as the most sustainable country in 2016. So along with this, however, there are also some interesting patterns that not necessarily support that market-based solutions are the way to go, even in the context of Sweden. So one interesting spillover that I also wanted to share with you is that not so long ago we learned that the data from that we gathered in the frames of this PhD thesis was used actually in the memo which was reported to the Council on Legislation with a suggestion to reduce the VAT to the nature guiding in Sweden. And actually the suggested reduction is quite drastic. So I will leave you with the, with the thinking whether it's a good result or not, whether you think that reducing tax in nature is a good thing. But the decision will be made in January. So in case there is a tax reduction is approved, so I think that we could suggest that probably there will be even more nature-based tourism businesses appearing, and especially those which offer guiding in nature. So that would be something interesting to follow up. Okay, so that's what I have to say. My 15 minutes are also up, so thank you very much. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.